Hi, my name is Sven, welcome back to the channel, hope you're doing great. Today we're talking about one special look and a tool that I developed to achieve it, the Bleach Bypass. And the DCTL I built features a very new and modern approach to it that I haven't seen anybody else use before, so let's go over it. Bleach Bypass is one of the most famous looks in color grading, and there are several ways to achieve this look. However, I found with all of the techniques that are out there, the results don't really look convincing because they just use arbitrary operations that get you somewhere. I took a completely different route and tried to replicate a classic bleach bypass by emulating the physical properties of the process. For that we need to understand what a bleach bypass is. When you shoot film, there are several layers that have different purposes. I won't bore you with the details, but in short, when film gets developed, it runs through multiple chemicals and water tanks to develop the colors and wash away dirt and also to secure the film. One of those chemicals is bleach that gets rid of silver pigments and therefore it increases the vibrancy of the colors. However, when you skip this part, so you bypass the bleach, you end up with a high contrast and rather desaturated image. This look has a certain glossy aesthetic that is actually quite desirable and therefore it has been used on countless films back in the day. Now, how would we do something like this with digital footage? Many people talk about a layer mixer approach with either an overlay or a soft light blend mode. But those two first of all have problems when the input of one of the layers is greater than 1, we get a lot of solarization in the highlights, and also they are completely arbitrary, they don't respect the working color space and they change the exposure of the footage. It's a quick and dirty solution for sure, but in my opinion it lacks a lot of control, which is why I came up with a scene-referred workflow that also introduces some extra features. So let's have a look. As with most of my tools, the DCTL is color space aware. It works in its internal tool color space. So in order to make this work properly, we have to select our current timeline color space in the drop-down here. For simplicity, we are working in DaVinci Intermediate in this video, but you can also select ACES and RE White Gamut 3 and 4. The first slider is the intensity. Pretty self-explanatory, this is the main control in the DCTL. It controls the overall intensity of the look. If we enable the Show Graph checkbox down below, we can see exactly what the tool is doing. Note that most of the following sliders do not have any effect when the intensity is at 0. They are controlled by this slider on a global level. Since a bleach bypass is increasing contrast, we need some pivot around which this contrast increase happens. By default, this pivot is set to 18% middle gray, so the exposure stays the same. And this is already a huge advantage over the basic techniques we discussed earlier, but of course you can change this pivot with the second slider if you need to. Now the next 3 sliders are all about creative manipulation. So internally the tool recreates the silver pigments that would have been washed away in the bleaching process and it adds them back to the image. The silver layer is way more complex than a simple desaturation that we see in older techniques. My DCTL allows you to create a very custom silver layer and balance its luminous response based on the incoming colors. This allows for a lot of creative freedom and control over how much a certain color affects the intensity of the contrast. And by the way, down below we see a checkbox called Preserve Silver Luminance. It's enabled by default and it makes sure any modification to these 3 sliders does not alter the overall perceived brightness, but if you want, you can of course disable the checkbox and get even more control. With the checkbox Show Silver Layer, you can also have a look at the silver layer all by itself. Now there are 2 look sliders. These are finely tuned extra controls I added to even further expand the possibilities of what you can do with a bleach bypass. So look 1 for example goes more into a greenish yellow direction, while look 2 makes the bleach bypass overall a bit cooler and adds some thick earthy undertone into the blacks. Both of them combined can create some really cool color palettes. With the next few sliders we can bring back detail in the highlights and shadows with 1 slider and 1 pivot control for each. This is especially helpful when you crank the intensity slider above really high. Another slider is the bleach highlight slider. This one is independent of the intensity slider above and it can add some extra desaturation in the highlights. Lastly, sometimes you might run into issues with extremely highly saturated neon colors, so I added a very simple gamut compression to the DCTL. This checkbox is enabled by default, but you can also disable it if you want. So now that you have a rough understanding of what the DCTL can do, let's have a look at a few examples.
So yeah, these are a few looks you can get with Noir Bleach Bypass, and as a bonus tip, the DCTL goes very well with my other tools like Noir Strips and Noir Curves, and you can find them on my website with the links in the video description. So I hope you find this tool helpful and inspiring. It definitely found its way into a bunch of the grades I did in the last few months. And for the next 4 weeks, you can get the DCTL with 25% off with the coupon in the video description. But you can also download the free demo version if you want to try it out first. And if you want to help out the channel, please leave a like and a comment and subscribe if you aren't already. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.